It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of Hashtag Event Icons, presented by Endless Entertainment, the show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything. So, you might be wondering, how do you get to ask questions? All you have to do is use the question panel on the right of GoToWebinar to submit your questions. Or you can hop on Twitter to submit your questions with the hashtag EventIcons. We'll be answering your questions live during the entire show. Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better conversation we can have. So please help share hashtag EventIcons on Twitter and Facebook. Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com. Now, without any further delay, this is Hashtag Event Icons with your hosts, Will Curran of Endless Entertainment, Laura Lopez of Social Tables, and Sean Holiday of Crowd Mics.
Oh, yeah. So, unfortunately, Laura and Sean are out for this week, so it's just me and my amazing guests, which I love, getting back to the roots and excited to rock and roll with this show. And I'm so excited. We got everyone in here now and ready to rock, and we're good to go. So this week we're talking 2017 event trends. I'm not going to go into a huge intro with everybody. A lot of these guys you guys know. They've been on the show before or have been a long time coming. So I'm going to introduce these guys, and we got to jump right on into this topic. So let's start with Mr. Jim Spellos. So Jim is a legend in the events industry. He's been doing this for 30 years. He doesn't need an intro. Everyone knows him. Everyone loves him. And we're so excited to have him. He's primarily focusing on event tech and technology now. So we're going to be talking a lot of really cool things. He's got some new toys to talk about, too, which are really related to event trends. So we're just really excited to have you finally on the show, Mr. Jim Spellos.
Thank you, Will. So glad to be here.
Awesome. Next up is a long-time requested guest. He's been people have been asking for him for quite a bit of time, and you know he's very, very busy. We've been talking to his agent, and he's high demand to be on these speaking engagements. Is Mr. Nick Borelli. Nick is an awesome friend, an amazing guy, and one of the funniest guys in the events industry too. And he's just got done writing a big chunk of the 2017 Event Trends Guide on Event Manager blog. So if you haven't yet, go check that out. Download that right now. And I'm sure Nick's going to elaborate on a lot of his trends that he came up with that were in that guide. So super excited to have you here, Mr. Nick Borelli. Yes.
Thanks for having me. I've been a long time lurker, first time caller.
Woo! I feel like it's one of those like call-in shows where all of a sudden you're like, I loved you. Like I've been watching the show for. I never mustered up the courage to call in. All right. So next up,
it's how I behave on social media too. I lurk.
Well, the good kind of lurking. All right. Next up is Mr. Corbin Ball. So Corbin, we actually had on last year's 2016 Event Trends episode, and I'm super excited to have Corbin back. We had a little bit of technical issues. We almost didn't have him here. I'm so excited to have him back, though, because we're going to be reflecting on 2016 trends and what happened, what was good, what was bad. And Mr. Corbin Ball is a legend in the events industry who writes an event trend guide every single year as well, and just really, really excited to have him. He doesn't need any more introduction because he's just amazing and great friend. Mr. Corbin Ball. Corbin, how are you?
I will. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope my internet connection will stay up and I'll be here through the time, but keeping my fingers crossed on this one.
You're looking good. You're looking good. All right. Cool. So I want to jump right on into the questions because we have a lot to talk about. So the first question, we're going to start off with the question we ask all of our guests, and I'm sure a lot of them are really, really curious to know, what got you into the events industry? So let's kick it off. Jim, you want to lead us off with what got you into the events industry?
Probably the same way most of us did, by accident. I was working in a physics organization when I got out of college and doing admin work, and my boss, nuclear physicist, dean of physics at Columbia, comes up to me and goes, "Do you want to handle our meetings?" I said, "Sure, what's it involved?" He goes, "Nothing much." I couldn't. He's a physicist, so figure. And about 2 weeks later, he came back to me, asked if I wanted to do it. I said, "Sure." He said, "Great. Our next meeting's in New York for 1,500 people, and you're in charge." And he walked away. And that was it. And I did the meeting, and that was 1983, that meeting was. And haven't looked back. You know, it was just so cool to be able to really figure out something that was just great to do. And, you know, you get into this industry, you don't get out.
It's true. You're a lifer for life in this one.
Yeah, you find a different way to be part of it, which is what I've done. I know it's Corbin's done that as well, but you stick to it.
That's awesome. Well, we appreciate you helping and help grow the industry over the last 30 years for sure.
My pleasure. I'm glad to be here and glad to be on this panel with these folks. It should be a lot of fun talking about some of the new tech that's out there and what we think the trends are going to be.
Awesome.
Definitely changing every day.
Very changing every day. And I'm excited to talk about it for sure. Speaking of tech trends, this man is a master of them. Nick, what got you into the events industry and where you are today?
It's the only industry I've ever been in. I was the one that took the coats at the family parties and put them on the bed, and I was the one that poured the coffee and did all the hospitality stuff at my parents' house for our family get-togethers, to the point where when I had my opportunity to have my first job at 14, my dad, who used to plan all the events for their shop, which had about 1,000 people at it, he had some sway at the catering company, so he said hire him as a dishwasher. So I've done every small incremental step from that to every service job you could possibly have in hospitality, to logistics is where I spent a lot of my time on being able to just map out a room and understand what that was, until I found out that if you have any kind of personality, that you can make a lot more money and save your back doing sales. And I went from sales, and then I said you can do even less back work and marketing, and then I found my niche there. So
awesome. It's
all, I love it, but I want to do the least amount of work that hurts my back. That's the goal.
Well, I keep that in mind if I ever need you to load in a show with me.
Not your guy. Not your guy.
No more. The AV days are done.
Retired.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I know, Corbin, you've had a chance to share what got you in the events industry last year. So you want to kind of remind everyone kind of what got you in the events industry and where you are today?
I started as a director of educational media for Western Washington University, and the small association moved to town and moved to Bellingham, where I live, and they wanted me to assist with the audiovisual component and marketing component of their meetings. And that technology company, SPIE, the association, caught the technology wave and we grew to run the largest meetings, and they still do, the largest meetings in the world in optics. And so it was a fun ride, but 19 years ago I went out to form my own business, speaking, consulting, and writing about it.
Awesome. I love it. And what I love about all the guys we have on the show today is that they are very much rock stars and have written guides on this sort of stuff. So I think we have like the best of the best really when it comes to talking about event trends, and I think we're going to have a really amazing conversation. They literally were all chatting before the show, and I was like, all right, guys, save some for the show. They're biting at the chomping bit to talk about these. So before we jump into trends, we have a new question that we've been asking everyone, and it's kind of my new favorite question. Alex Plaxton, who does all of our live tweeting, so if you're not on Twitter right now, hashtag event icons in it up right now. Hop on Twitter and use that hashtag to join the conversation. And Alex has the best question ever, and I literally want to know for all of you guys, and I think I have an idea for Jim, so I'm going to I'll take a guess at it, and we'll see if it's right, but what would you do if you weren't in the events industry? So, Jim, I know you do the music thing on the side. Would it be music for you?
Yeah, other than teaching, and what I'm doing now actually is the coolest thing. The reason I might not do the music thing is because by not having to make money at it, you can follow what you want to do artistically rather than follow what someone says you have to produce. But I got to tell you, the merging of the music and the technology, I was spending this weekend with my guitar and my keyboards and my iPad writing music, and it's all just doable to anybody these days. So I think that combination is really what I'd probably be teaching that, some combination of music and tech.
Awesome. I love it. I love music too, so we need more of that in the world. Corbin, what about you?
Just so you know, that we just did a 360 video of our band's rehearsal last night. So I just posted to the YouTube channel. We'll get it on Facebook later on tonight so people can see it.
I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about 360 video in a little bit too, so I'm
probably
excited. The AV guy in me is very excited. Corbin, what about you? I mean, I'm really curious to know, what would you do? I feel like you would be traveling the world, like just enjoying
I think
life.
That's what was going to be my answer. I'm having too good of a time. It's hard to imagine not doing what I'm doing because it's not like work. I love what I'm doing, and but if not, I think it would be somehow involved in international travel, because I always say my job feeds my travel habit, and so I think that that's what I want to be doing.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. I love it. And then Nick, I'm gonna take a guess, but I also feel like you're a wild card sometimes, and you probably have like some secret hidden like talent that I don't know of. What would you do if you weren't in the events industry?
If you were thinking about what I might say, it's because if you could see my point of view, right beyond my camera is the beginning of a collection that is 40,000 comic books. A number you can't picture. It's insane. So I thought I was going to be along those tracks potentially. But that said, it would probably either be something in the realms of psychology or law, something that really is all about studying people and being able to determine how people react to things and then what you learn from it. Live events to me are just a window into that. It's a small little a test, each time. It's just to be able to play around with people's emotions in the best way possible. So somewhere in those realms, I think.
Awesome. I would not fancy, like, not fancy lawyer. You would definitely be an amazing lawyer. You would you'd have like 100% prosecution rate or defense rate or something like that. But, but I've never would have thought to say like, yeah, lawyer Nick Borelli.
I'm
That's awesome.
head to toe tattooed and lots of piercing, so that might hurt me. But I did a number of years of a very celebrated speech and debate team, of which I was fairly good at. So it was actually along that track before I made the decision to embrace the insanity that is event people.
Cool. Very cool. Awesome. Well, we already have our first question from the audience. Mr. Mike Pittock, who you guys all know. Mike is also an event icon. We've had him on the show, and him and I had tea over in London. So exciting to see you on the show again, Mike. Mike wants to know, since we have some amazing event tech people, he wants to know, do you think there's a better time than now to be in event tech and an expert in event tech? Let's start off with you, Nick.
I mean, there's so much more data now than there ever has been, so your ability to be able to determine how people react to things, even in the moment, is something that you never really had the opportunity to do. You'd potentially get a client to say this worked or this didn't, but now there's a lot more opportunity to see and gauge the response of attendees in the moment, which is so much better data. I mean, post-event survey data is few, far between, and garbage, where now the ability just to be able to gauge the excitement level on all kinds of different real high-tech ways of sweat and heartbeat to use of hashtag and the words that people use. So just the fact that we can communicate a little bit closer and gauge the reaction to live experiences tells me that there's really never been a better time.
Awesome.
I mean, outside the future, which will
outside
be
the future. Maybe in the future. Better.
It keeps building every day. I mean, all the technology that's out there doesn't go away. So the amount of stuff that we have to play with, to try to utilize, it's actually a sense of overwhelming. I imagine that's going to be part of the conversation from the planner perspective, which is with all this stuff out there and more coming, what do they focus on? But from the geek side, there's no cooler time to be here, because we're just trying to figure out different things and see how it works, and a lot of it's hit and miss. And that's great, because failure is as important as success with all of this. But the huge successes are going to revolutionize how we do our events, how we do our conferences and meetings. So I couldn't imagine that even 2 months ago was a better time than it is right now. And that's going to just continue to move forward.
Fantastic.
I'd like to broaden it a bit. I think that there's never been a better time to be in business than right now. It's just the fact that we can do a 4-point webcast here as simple as just logging on, but there are so many collaboration tools and so many analytic tools that you never have. I mean, we have the ability to run international speaking businesses out of our spare bedroom, and it's something you just couldn't do decades ago, and it's just getting better all the time, and I think it's the coolest time that ever have been alive to see it in terms of what technology, and the stuff that's coming around the corner is even cooler yet. And so it's we're living in very exciting times.
Hey, Corbin, could you imagine 30 years ago having the tools that they have right now, and what we would do with them?
When we were doing the coolest 30 years ago, the coolest tool was an orator font to type large print onto on the badges. So we've come quite a ways.
I remember bringing the database, the DBase home with a registration in probably 89 or 90, and I had a dot matrix printer, and I spent all weekends printing out the 3,000 badges for the conference and having them bring them back in Monday morning. I go, that's amazing. We never would have been able to do that the year before. So it really is phenomenal what the change looks like.
Well, it's awesome you guys mentioned like how it's changed so much in the last 30 years. Aaron Kaufman's out in the audience right now. Shout out to another event icon. It's like the reunion episode right now. Aaron asks the question, can you predict how you think event tech will look in 10 years? Or even if he also poses a question, or will it look different in 10 years? So, Corbin, what are your thoughts? I mean, you've obviously seen so much change.
It's fun to predict. Web year is like a dog year, though. Things can change so much, even a year's time, let alone 10 years. I think that we're going to see, and we're just starting to see this scratching the surface on augmented and virtual reality. This definitely will have impacts on events, and the ability to attend conferences and from a remote location and it's like the Star Trek holodeck is coming. And so I think that in 10 years' time, that will be well along the way. Artificial intelligence is and the ability for that to analyze and to assist and to sort through the data and help with that is going to. Data analytics will be huge coming around. In 10 years' time, driverless cars will be, autonomous vehicles will be a norm, and that's how we'll get around they're starting those for Uber in San Francisco right now, and so it's well on the way, and so it's going to be we're approaching the Jetsons more and more every day here in terms of some of the technology that's coming.
That's very true. Well, before we reveal too many trends, I'm going to stop actually and take a quick break because I don't want to quite jump too much into the trends because that's basically my only question is what do you guys think the trends are for next year? But before we do that, I kind of reflect back because I think a lot of times we come out with these event trend guides, and I'm Endless is definitely guilty of this. We publish one every year, but we never follow up on it, right? How did we do? What was our favorites? What didn't actually come true, right? So I'd love to know from you guys, what were your personal favorite trends from 2016 that ended up coming true? It could either be something that's evolving kind of, but hopefully not leak too much into 2017, but maybe something that you're like, hey, this was something we predicted, and boom, it came 100% true. So, Jim, why don't you kick it off?
Can I jump in on that, Will? Because I don't think anything became 100% true. And I think what happens is the technology clearly outpaces our ability to process and use it. So I think it's a really kind of an odd end game to try to predict anything. And let's face it, none of us know. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what that big, shiny object's going to be to change the game. I mean, from my perspective, and Nick, you and I were talking about it beforehand, one of the game changers this year in a tech component was Pokemon Go, just because it brought the augmented reality conversation into mainstream. Before then, it was the kind of way creepy, way spooky Google Glass, I'm spying on you conversation. And now it's, well, there's something that's consumer-based that's giving everybody the ability to get into it. And AR is an old technology. It takes a long time. I mean, I know we're going to talk trends, and I know some of the stuff we're going to talk about for next year is probably what we said would be really big this year, and we're just porting it over. But, that AR thing really shows that we're not in charge of the conversation, the consumer is. And when the consumer's ready for it or the killer app and tool is out there, then that's when the game's going to change for that particular technology.
Nick, I know you're huge into Pokemon Go. You're like the master of Pokemon Go. You have the watch on right now, right?
Yeah, I have the wearable. I've got some Pokemon stickers.
Did you predict that if Pokemon Go was going to be as big as it was? Like, obviously, when it came, did you see it coming out? Was it out of the blue for you?
Yeah, I mean, there was zero new technology. I think that a lot of times when it comes to software, we think innovation is what drives, and it's not innovation. It's just the right combination of ingredients at the right time. The gamification elements of that game didn't make it exciting, or didn't get anyone to jump onto it. It wasn't about this new thing, augmented reality. That's been around. It was the combination of all the things plus that IP. And I think that the thing that most people don't realize about Pokemon Go is that whole game existed for 4 years prior to Pokemon Go. Mm-hmm. And Egress is the game that preceded it. It's very similar. I mean, Pokemon Go is essentially a skin So it's not about the technology, it's about packaging it in a way that consumers go, oh, I get it. And one thing I used to rally against all the time, there's a website called Unmarketing that I both listen to the podcast all the time and really follow. It's an excellent, Scott does a really great job there. He's talked about QR codes and how they're one of the best examples of just because a technology exists doesn't mean you have to use it. And QR codes were this dead thing for a number of years. But Snapchat seems like it brought it back, and then now Twitter has QR codes and Facebook Messenger has QR codes, and that same kind of content repackaged and done in a cool way, all of a sudden now people latch onto it. So I think it's not about what's the latest technology, it's how do you hit people with it at the right time for the right problem. And that's what I couldn't have expected. I would have said that's dead, move on, that's dead, move on. But it's not about dead. Like you're into music, you know, a theremin, for instance, is something that's been around for a long time, but at the right time when you implement it, it's really cool, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I love it. I love that idea that you said, like, it's a repackaging, like, you know, same cup of tea kind of reheated, or, you know, it's like taking, you know, peanut butter and putting it with jelly, right? They both existed for a long time, but someone finally put together, and peanut butter and jelly was the newest hottest thing, right? So I love that. I love that very much. Corbin, what about you? Go ahead.
I was going to say the QR code you mentioned. I hear more and more when people are trying to wrap their head around AR, they go, it's like a QR code, right? You know, and they're finally using it as a base of knowledge for a new technology, which is kind of fascinating when you think about it.
Huh. I love
Interesting.
it. Corbin, what about you? Like, what are your thoughts? Was there any, like, trends that you saw that were your favorites?
No, sir, I'm looking back at my 2016 trends article, which I wrote in September of 2015, and there are 9 trends, and most of them have really come true. One was that at that time, augmented reality and virtual reality would start making headway. At that time I wrote it, there's nothing written for hotels or at that time, and now you see Shangri-La hotels and Hilton hotels and Marriott, their V-room service. You know, they're all moving in a big way, and even there's a new room diagramming company, Event Forte, that is building. They do 3D, 2D, and 3D room diagramming, but it's just a quick step to be able to put on VR goggles and to walk through the room, and they've done that. One of the other trend, or one of the ones that I predicted, that videos and images are going to be dominant in the social channels, and since that prediction, the Facebook Live video and Snapchat video, and you know, all the social channels have moved into video and focusing on events with that, and so that was a fairly accurate prediction as well. The other one is that in terms of beacon technology, that the wearable beacons would be the ones that would build out, and we're starting to see that. I was just at IAEE this last week, and you know, everybody's wearing the wearables, but the HubVents, the company that did that, is going to be doing the Consumer Electronics Show this coming year, and so we're going to see that channel for BLE is the one, and the others, those are a few of them, but the other predictions are pretty accurate as well.
Very cool. I think, like you guys mentioned too, it was very much a start, like, for a lot of things. So, like, for example, Nick, I know when we talked 2017, VR and, you know, mixed reality is like a really huge thing for next year. And it was very much the start of it this year. So very, very cool. I think that's a lot of times like our trends, right? It's like you start to see it creep in. I mean, we're December this year, moving into, you know, 2017 next month. So it's about time we start trying to predict what we think is going to happen, hopefully in at least a month, right? So do you guys think there was any trends? Curious, we kind of started to hint around this. Was there any trends that you thought, like, that people were like, this is the newest, hottest thing, right? So, like, maybe like 2 years ago was, you know, like we were saying, QR codes, like, or a couple of years ago, people were like, QR codes are going to change everything, right? And sure, while they definitely did start to evolve, and people know about them now, and they're starting to get involved, you know, people said, hey, that fell kind of on its face. Was there any technologies that you guys thought that you saw a trend pop up that was just like, it just completely fell on its face, and, you know, you're like, and maybe you're even happy it didn't happen?
You know, here's one thing, and I think this really speaks to the fact that every technology pushes forward, then moves backwards for a number of reasons, and then pushes forward again. I would have thought the IoT and all of the connected devices in the home would really have made a bigger push. From a personal perspective, I understand why not, because of the security issues that those things have, and people aren't aware that it's an IP address like anything else is, and the DDoS attack that occurred a few weeks ago was all perpetrated through the Nest thermostats and the stuff like that, and people not understanding the protection they need. But I would have thought the IoT would have exploded this year. I think it's still poised to, and I think that clearly everything having an IP address and having that capability to be able to be completely connected, once we figure out the security issue, which we haven't yet, but once we do, that becomes an absolute game changer in business and personal life and everything.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that too. 2 days ago, yesterday, Android announced Android Things, which is like basically the phone software for Internet of Thing devices. So now Google's saying, hey, we're putting a big focus on it. We're developing an operating system for it. So really awesome that you're mentioning that. Nick, what about you? Any trends you thought fell on its face this last year?
In a year's time, I don't know. I think that there's so many things that the promise of it is all that you really get, that just haven't really blown up as maybe as fast as you think. But I don't know. Everything's moving so exponentially. The Internet of Things is definitely something that's been talked about for 5 or 6 years now that really hasn't caught on in the popular world. I think that beyond that. Certain aspects of drone use in live events based on legal parameters have halted where people thought they would be, that it would be all drones everywhere. There's some very specific and good reasons for safety and for security that they haven't become as pervasive as they would have liked to be as an industry. So I'm not saying necessarily that some of the reasons are bad that these things haven't proliferated at the rate that some people thought they would. So those are two that just jump out of the top of my head.
Very interesting. Corbin, what about you? Any trends on your end that fell on your face?
In my 2016 Trends article, I also talked about the Internet of Things, and I agree with you, Jim. I think it's just a real matter of the rate of deployment. It's huge. It will be huge. It already is. It may be not directly in the home as much as it is for smart grids and smart buildings and those type of things, but smart roadways, the autonomous vehicles that we're talking about, that's all coming here. And I just got an Lexus Dot, and it's just so cool to be able to say, play this music, and there it is, and it's just or whatever ask. It's really a new world out there, and so I'm still optimistic about the development. It's just a little later than expected.
I think part of the issue is that the implementation just takes much longer than the creationism process. You can create something, you have the vision, but for implementation to catch up, to be able to get the roadways designed and make sure it's tested and properly laid down, it's going to take a while. I also don't know, and I may be way off base on this, I don't think we've had many revolutionary ideas in the past few years. I think we're at an evolutionary stage, which is kind of natural, that we have a lot of cool ideas, and then we start to figure out how to use them and how they might integrate together, and then we might hit another revolutionary stage. But I think right now we sort of have so much stuff that still has promise. AI and drones and the IoT, that it can't all be deployed at once. It can't all be thrown out there, and there's a huge part of the population that doesn't want that, or is very scared by it, or is afraid that those type of technologies are actually impacting their ability to have jobs and work. So, we have to deal with the undercurrent of what's happening in the economy and with people, as well as just the coolness of the technology.
Awesome. I will say I'm a huge Internet of Things guy. I'm the guy who has like 4 Echo Dots in my house, all the Hue bulbs and everything. So I'm rooting for that trend big time.
Change your username and password on all those, okay?
Yes.
Just make sure you do that.
They're all super long and have all symbols. No one's so
good.
I'm huge about that. Yeah, that's a very good point. Mike actually had a comment in the audience about how it just hasn't taken off too because there's no real standard for everything to kind of go through. For example, we have on the home, we have like Zigbee, Z-Wave, all those things like that, all these different types, and they still all communicate with each other. For example, Google Home still doesn't communicate with my lock. And so until someone comes around, maybe it's Android, and says, here's one standard for communication for everything, it's going to take a little while. So I think everyone communicating has a lot to do with innovation.
Nick and Corbin, I hear that. I'm thinking there's not going to be a standard because Apple and Google aren't going to play nicely with each other. And I think we have more fractionalization than we're ever going to have integration in all of this. Plus, by the way, the name sucks. The IoT just isn't sexy. And let's face it, we need a better name for that.
That's true. The word things is kind of weird.
That's actually one of the main problems I have with expectations people have with event technology is that they don't all talk to each other because they're not going to. They're all small. They're all fractionalized. And no one's working on, or I shouldn't say, I think a lot of people are working on, but no one's deployed something that is a neural net to combine enough of these things. And until that happens, innovation speed in the events industry is going to be really incremental. It's going to be, here's a widget over here, here's a widget over here, and that's what the overwhelming factor comes in for event implementers, is that there isn't something with more of an easy API that they can plug a bunch of things into, because there isn't an Android or a Google or even something even fractionalized like that even exists. So I see that niche world, or that fractionalized world that is coming for the consumer in the event tech microcosm, like is a worst case scenario of that right now. That's why innovation isn't really as exciting as people want it to be.
So need like an if this then that for
I would disagree with you a little bit on that. I mean, I think that's one of the trends that's coming here is that in the past this has been a real problem because these systems, especially so-called platforms that are supposed to do everything, they really don't do. One size does not fit all in the meetings industry, and they do not do everything well with that. And so one of the trends that I outlined in this year's technology article is that these newer cloud-based systems are being built with robust APIs that are designed to integrate with and interoperate with Salesforce and the Salesforce automation tools and all the standard Gmail and the MailChimp, and you go down through this, and so you're starting to see consortiums develop of different types of technology companies, a registration company and an abstract management company and a marketing company, and you're starting to see software as a service products for platform integration as well. Built.io is an example of this, where they're really designed to help the average person connect through a number of the different products using the application program interfaces, APIs, to do that. And so I think that we're not going to be constantly stuck with this, well, we just can't work with each other, and that's been an impossibility. I think we're moving in strong steps in the right direction, and we're going to see more and more of this happen. Integration is going to be one of the key buzzwords in these next couple of years.
Awesome.
I so agree with integration, but I also want to mention that until this company, Google, and their new phone, until they figure out a single interface, there's going to be a lot of fractionalization still occurring. If the Pixel becomes that standard phone and they get everyone off of Marshmallow and KitKat and all the old OSs, and you have a single OS there and a single OS with Apple and a single OS with Microsoft, then I think those APIs and that convenient approach for these services to be connected seamlessly will really take off. But I think Google right now holds the card, even though, as a strong company, I would say that they've booted this on a bunch of occasions with what they've done with their phones and allowing the phone service companies to drive rollout times and all that. I think it really is hurting the progress in order to help their sales.
Solid points. Solid points. Speaking of phones and kind of apps on phones, I want to kind of pivot to a question about and eventually get to an audience question that we have. But I want to kind of talk about a trend that we saw this last year that I think that Nick saw was coming, and now he talks a lot about, which is Snapchat. Snapchat's been out for almost 3 years now, 4 years now, or something like that. And it was always kind of big for just a little bit of messaging and things like that. But this last year, it really took steam, right? It was the first time I heard everyone saying, I don't know how to use Snapchat. Show me how to use Snapchat. And we're seeing it prevalently at conferences and everything like that. So what are your guys' thoughts as far as, Snapchat's growth? Because I think it's very much affected the rest of social media and the rest of, media in general. Is that, like, for example, Instagram's copying its features, Facebook's copying its features. Basically, Instagram and Facebook are copying all of its features. Everyone wants to be Snapchat. What are your guys' thoughts on the rise of Snapchat this last year? Corbin?
I think Snapchat is the most exciting social media development in this last year. With 110 million daily views, it's blowing everybody else out of the water just about. The one thing I find interesting about it, it's way more than disappearing messages. I mean, they have been targeting events, I think. Their geolocation capabilities, the ability to set up geofences and target that around events is significant. Their events, their stories feature, which is really bringing people together. I think that this is a very, and they're continually involved. They just came out with a whole series of new features today, and I think that it's really an interesting one to watch. And I think that they're going to continue to move. And I mean, all the social media tools, they're moving kind of toward events, or using events as a way of, when you boil down social media and events, we're trying to do the same thing. We bring people together, and I think that the venue of a live event and is one that's attractive to these companies, and Snapchat really fits right into that category.
So Nick, I wanted to ask you, so this is actually a question from Twitter, and Corbin kind of brought it up that it's more than just, sending picture messages back and forth to each other. So the question from the audience is, do you think Snapchat should even be considered a social media, since it's primarily one-to-one? I mean, you have the stories feature, like you mentioned, that Corbin mentioned, but, do you consider it more of a messaging tool, or do you think it's, valuable as a social media and as a form of communication to the masses?
I didn't for the first 3 years. That's why I didn't advocate it for events. That's why I played with it when it came out, and I just played with it. I used it as a way to communicate one-to-one to people, as I did when I was on IRC, then ICQ, then AOL, then Facebook Messenger, and WhatsApp, and I went through all, and it was just a slight variation on that with some really cute little ways to augment the conversations. When the story feature gained prominence, I started paying attention, and when adopters of larger media started playing around with it and getting some traction on it, I paid more attention, and when certain influencers used it, I really started adopting it for certain events. I don't think your Facebook posts are much different than a Snapchat post. I don't care what you posted 3 days ago. I'll never see it again. And the fact that I technically can doesn't make any difference. So much social media is disposable anyway, and this one just formalizes it. And by formalizing it, it strengthens its fear of missing out factor, which was my #1 trend this year when on my trend report contribution was the value of fear of missing out on experiences and the value of fear of missing out in events in general. 60% of Snapchat users contribute to it every single day. 25% of LinkedIn users log in once a month. Just log in. Might be accidental. It's such an engaging, addictive platform that it absolutely matters. Now, the fact that, and this is what Corbin, I think you probably heard me say this already, so I apologize, but marketers ruin everything, and marketers haven't ruined this yet, and because it's really infuriating as a marketer, the things I can't do with it, the data I don't get, my ability to automate, my ability to program content that is probably happening right now on Twitter that I wrote 3 weeks ago for my accounts. I can't do that. It has to be in the moment. It has to be live. It's making marketers act like people, and the content's better for it. And having people having to jump through hoops to find you means that they actually care. So I think that we're eventually going to get out of this vanity metrics world of social media of how many followers you have, which never mattered, but people thought it did. and get into how high the quality of your followers are. And I think that Snapchat is perfect for that.
If I may, first of all, that last point about the vanity metrics, it ain't going away because we're human and we want those vanity metrics. I agree they should.
By nature, but
yeah,
of course.
By nature, that's what it's about. But my view on Snapchat is it's driving change more than driving adoption. It's driving change because Facebook and Instagram are forced to be able to look at all these great ideas and implement it. But as I teach outside the industry into different industries, Snapchat is that either I don't want to know about it, I don't need to know about it, or I want to know about it because I want to know what my kids are doing. And it's not that conversation about functionality. And I don't know whether we're at a point where the critical mass of event planners are going to be planning for people in industries that even care about Snapchat yet. It may be way too ahead of the curve for a couple more years for the demographic that Snapchat tends to play with. So my take on Snapchat is I'm following it just to see how quickly Instagram and Facebook are going to use those tools and go, okay, here's a great idea. You know, we'll change the name so it sounds like we came up with it. And one more thing on that Instagram conversation is that's the social media that blows me away that our industry is not using as much as they should, as visual as we are in the hospitality industry.
It's my favorite social media as a user, it's my favorite social media as a marketer, and it's my favorite social media for engagement in the live events realm. I've been talking a lot about Snapchat mostly because it's new to the scene of even being a viable option, where a year ago this time it was not even anything worth talking about. Now, just like all social media, that's not the right thing for every problem. It's simply a tool, and it might come back like some of the other tools we talked about before, but it's a tool that is treating social media very differently than a lot of the other ones are, and because they started to rest on their laurels and decline, like the Twitter, for instance, which is just in a tailspin of lack of innovation and unaware of what it is. I mean, the fact that it could have been bought by Salesforce or Disney means it has no rudders. I mean, the directions those would have gone.
So who's going to buy Twitter? Because obviously someone's going to put an offer.
How much? Let's do it. Let's do it, guys. Let's put it together. How much you got?
ESPN.
Yeah, then it would serve it. But ESPN is Disney, right? So Disney said no. So Salesforce I thought was interesting, but they passed on it, which. I think they're going to pass on social media completely after both looking at LinkedIn and Twitter. I doubt they'll build their own, and if they do, it'll be more like Slack than it will be actually like a social media per se. Who buys it? Whoever buys it will define what it is from that point, because now it's nothing, and it's not trying to be anything. It's in a holding pattern for someone to define it, and that's death. I mean, unless someone throws a life raft at it. And
we're seeing people in the audience shout Microsoft. The audience is saying Microsoft.
They just bought LinkedIn. What do they want with Twitter?
I don't know.
But I hesitate to see like what if they could figure out what to do with it. I mean, like when you see the buyouts that have happened over the last 20 years of AOL and Yahoo, just because someone tried to define it and buy it doesn't mean that they have the ability to have their thumb on the pulse of what made it powerful to begin with, or what the deficit in the marketplace is right now. With lack of innovation at its core, which it's proven to have, I don't see a future in it. I really don't. It's unfortunate because I shouldn't say that. If it could figure out a way to be a niche social media, I think it's fine. But it's really hard to be a niche social media because, especially with an IPO, like you have to be able to keep making money.
So before we real quick, before we dive too much into selling Twitter, we only have a couple more minutes left, so I want to kind of steer the conversation back in the right direction.
I think we should
we could talk about this for days. Maybe we need to do a Twitter episode soon.
Hey, Nick, maybe we buy it. Okay, Corbin, maybe we just buy.
Let's just do it.
We're gonna do a Twitter episode.
You're doing a lot of great business. You should pitch in.
Yeah.
I'm working on it, man. All right, cool. So let me bring the conversation. We have a couple minutes left, so I want to end on the thing that we or not end, but jump into the topic that I think everyone's here to talk about, which is the 2017 trends. So we've kind of teased out a little bit. I know you guys have a ton. A bunch of you guys have written long, lengthy articles on it. We've read our articles, but I'm curious to know, what do you think is your number one pick trend for this next year that you think is going to be the big thing that we're going to shift into? So, Jim, you want to kick it off?
I would love to say VR, VR because I am so enamored with it right now. But I think the big trend next year is how we harness data, and is the coming of AI and the ability for us to be able to use that in meetings, which is not happening in 99% of the conferences that is out there and meetings that are out there. We have every we have every piece of information quantified and the ability to analyze it. They're cool tools. We're used to AI. We see it in Netflix. We see it in Amazon. We see it in credit card fraud detection, so it's not a new tool. But there has to be some way for us to be able to go, we have a basic database information, and we now need to use a Hadoop-style approach to figure out what it is that we have and how we can use it to make our events better. So to me, it's AI.
I love it. I love it. I will agree with that one. Nick, what about you? I know you have to pick one. Sorry.
I know. I'm looking at a bunch. Data is it's such a cop-out answer, but it's the days of the gut are over, I think, completely. And it's not data is data. There's always data. There's always been data. You just couldn't really do anything with it. And now that I think that there's different programs that you can actually implement data for, so an event takes place and now you can determine who your biggest advocates are, and you could actually use this information to create influencer marketing programs and think tanks around your events and actually court the people that are stakeholders. Stakeholders have been what? Sponsors, presenters, anyone has money in the game, but influencers are stakeholders. And I think being able to turn an influencer into a proper stakeholder by identifying them is something that is really exciting in both in the marketing tech realm, which I kind of live in. That and being able to make the fear of live streaming go away and realize that if your event, if you fear people watching your event at home as opposed to attending it, you have a bad event. And just knowing that you have to be able to have some element of it. Like if you don't have a live experience that is exciting enough, or it has a fear of missing out, or has something that needs to be there in person, then it's not a great event in the first place. So I also think that live streaming monetization has a long ways to go. Not from the technological standpoint, it's there, it's easy, anyone can do it. It sort of has a long ways to go of fighting a fear, I think, of hacks who think that they are missing out.
Awesome. I love that. If you're too afraid to do live streaming because you're afraid people won't attend the event, then you don't have a good event. I love that. Fantastic. Corbin, what about you? What's your one trend?
Well, I'm following a similar line that Nick did as well. That it speaks to the maturization of our industry. Is that we're the tools are becoming able to talk with each other, and I think that because of that, data analytics is going to be an extremely important. You're seeing this as being developed by the software companies, and to be able to integrate from multiple sources data points. It used to be that the on-site meeting was the black hole of event data management because you had computers before and after, but during the meeting you're flying blind, and now you have a myriad of sources that you can gather, and it's going to be a matter of being able to analyze that and make sense out of it in real time. And I think the tools and then being able to take that and suck that back into a CRM system and into a marketing automation system, and I think that that's going to be bring huge advantages to events. Being able to, every touch is trackable on a mobile event app. Every movement can be trackable with mobile beacons, wearable beacons, and you have social media sentiment analysis, and the list goes on and on and on of data sources. And then being able to combine those, bring those through, make those make sense out of it, and that's tied with what I was talking about earlier as well, the software integration tools that make that happen and make multiple products act as if they're one and be able to collect the sources from that. So I think that that's a big trend, and not a real sexy one, but it's one that I think that is that it speaks to where our industries are growing. We're finally growing up from a digital standpoint, and it's and we're seeing some exciting things develop because of it.
Absolutely. It definitely couldn't be in a more exciting time to be in the events industry, that's for sure. Awesome. So I have two more questions for you guys. So kind of going into 2017, obviously we have a lot of people who plan events or involved in events watching the show either live right now or after the show as well. So I'm curious to know if you had to pick like one tip for 2017 for planners, what would be your one tip to them, whether it's related to event trends or not? What would you think that would be? So, Nick, I know you said that one thing about, hey, if your event's not good enough, you probably shouldn't be live streaming anyways, right? But what would be your one tip you think for event planners, Nick, that you'd want them to go into 2017 knowing?
Just because it seems like this is the line I'm on right now, I'm going to stick with it. Not treating how you engage with the people who are digitally engaged with your event, your live event, as an afterthought, and actually programming your event as if you would like how you use show flow, for instance, or any kind of scripting or anything like that. Of scripting your event from the digital side as well. What are the different activation points? What are the different emotional arcs? And what do you want out of people in that realm as well, as opposed to saying it's a bolt-on, you do it reactively as you can think of it, but actually craft your story in a parallel line in a digital to be able to create whatever unique goals you want, either to have them come to your event the following year or be able to get some, the complete but different value out of the event in a digital format. So I think that just having those people kind of latch on and just do it reactively, it has to be scripted and you have to be able to do it with purpose.
I love it. I love it. Jim, what's your one tip for planners? They're all listening.
Stop being afraid to fail, okay? That's important. We overanalyze in this industry, and we compare and we think about this and that, and we don't get anything done. Try it. The most difficult part of this is going to be selling your boss that we're going to try 3 things, and 2 of them and maybe 3 are going to fail, and that's good. And if they are aware and open and understand, they will support it. If not, you ain't going to get any technology in there because there's not going to be that absolute sure thing. You got to try it. It's the same in all industries, but we lost our ability and we put too much fear in failing, and we have to stop that.
I love it. I love it.
I like that a lot. I like
All
that a
these are
lot.
so good. Corbin, what's your one tip?
I think that what's happening, how technology is affecting events, one of the biggest things is that it's creating the event as an experience. There are so many ways that people can be engaged at events through their mobile apps and through networking applications, through gamification, through social walls. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And I think that for my recommendation to planners is be aware of this and educate yourself about the need of trying these different ones. And there's so many that you can try, and there are many of them that are free tools or low-cost tools. But it's the event as an experience is what attendees, or better word, participants, are expecting. And I think that as we move forward to embrace these tools and not be afraid of them, one of the ways you do that is by educating yourself about the options out there and trying them.
Awesome. I love it. Those are fantastic tips, very actionable too, which I love for everyone to go into 2017 with. So we're going to end the show on my last and one of my favorite questions, which is what resources do you have that you want to share, whether it's a website, a blog post, or anything like that. So starting off with maybe like any trend guides that you have seen, or maybe one that you participated in or wrote. Definitely please share those right now to let us know where they can find it. And then maybe like a cool tool, new app, new blog post, new book you just read, really anything. Feel free, and I know Nick's looking around thinking about grabbing something right now, so we'll kick it off.
Actually, well, let me start, because what I want to do
Yes,
is mention the other 2 guys. Because if you want to keep up on technology, it's about Nick and Corbin and what they've written and what they do. We're talking top of the industry. You know, I'm just a geek that teaches out there, but these guys have stuff that you can read and you can get, and I think that that's what everyone has to be focusing on. The tool to use is social media, is to understand your filters and be able to curate effectively, because I don't care. I mean, we diss Twitter for 10 minutes in here, and I still use Twitter as one of my main tools to figure out what's going on in the industry. So use the hashtags and use the filters, but follow these two guys, okay? Because they're the ones that really are making it happen and have great, great stuff that you can read.
And follow this guy, Mr. Jim Spellos, too. Come on.
Yes, yeah,
my bad. Okay, that'll take.
Yes, it is.
All right, Corbin, what cool, obviously, please let everyone know where they can find your guide, and then any cool tools, resources that you have.
The two tools I offer is my website, corbinball.com, and then my Tech Talk newsletter, which goes out to it's the longest running newsletter, 18 years now, and it goes out to about 11,000 people. So you can subscribe to that at my website, and it goes out every other month. And but there's a lot, as Jim pointed out, there are a lot of good sites out there. I'm following Nick and Jim and Will, you too. I mean, there are a lot of thought leaders out there, and I think that it's the one thing about our industry, we're really well networked, and I think that and open to sharing, and one of the things, if you can follow experts, so to quote, but also asking your peers what their issues are and what their success rates are, because I think people are really willing to help in this industry.
Love it. All right, last but not least, Nick.
I'll do some really quick ones. One thing that we talked about before this started that I wanted to shoehorn in here, and I think I can make it stick, is what you should be doing as event professionals to get the most information possible is all these geniuses are definitely important, but what's most important are your attendees. Be a great people watcher. Figure out how people tick by watching how they react to objects, how they react in different environments. And I had a chance to talk to Corbin about this in Vegas, and I'm trying to develop something around this, a curriculum around this, as a really intro pop psychology way to design based on experiences that people already have and how they do that. So anyways, watch people, try to do that in, where you're allowed to. So I'll tell you what, this book, I don't know if I want to say it out loud, but if you could see it, is really interesting when we were talking about how event people aren't willing to fail, and they're also, the hospitality gene is so through that it's a lot of nice guys in our industry, and we're just a little scared to just like for instance, these two guys who made their own path, right? Waiting for someone to give a path to you and saying this is what is expected of me is so typical of a lot of type A people who are just trying to focus on maintaining or perfecting something, as opposed to just going out there and saying, no one's ever done this before, but I'm going to try it, and I'm going to give it a shot, and I'm going to do it my way. You don't see that a lot in the event industry. And then I got really into this book too. It's from Clark Allen, who's a really awesome event designer. It's called The Inevitable Box. It's something that in event people really would get into, because he talks about all the failures he's had for the last 30 years in the event industry, specifically about starting one of the first DMCs in the early 90s in Charlotte, and a couple other different event entrepreneur experiences he's had, and he is brutal in all of the in his self-evaluation of the mistakes he's made, and it's very special to event people because they'll see a lot of the things that they've experienced over the last 30 years in events in his life. But those are just on my table now. Awesome.
I love it. Woo! Oh my gosh. What an amazing episode. We are coming right to the end, almost perfectly on timing because these guys are bosses. They know how to run the show. I got to give a huge thank you to you guys. That was just absolutely amazing. I was furiously taking notes. For everyone who's tuned in right now, if you want to catch all the links and things, the books and all that, if we're going too fast, we're going to post all this on the website. So just head over to the blog. I post it over on the right-hand side, helloendless.com/blog. Check it out. We're going to have all the resources there for everyone. But this is just an absolutely amazing episode. These guys are just so awesome to talk to. I literally could talk to them for hours on hours, but I know they're very busy people, so I want to keep good to their schedule. So I want to give a huge thank you. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Corbin. You guys have been absolutely amazing, and thank you guys so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. It was fun to not just be a lurker.
It was great.
Awesome, awesome. Well, you guys, we got to get out of here. It's the end of the episode. If I can have my host stick around for just a second, but we're going to catch you guys all next week again on #Event Icons. I hope you guys all have an amazing week, and we'll see you guys all in 7 days.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of Hashtag Event Icons. To catch the transcription and all of the resources mentioned, head to www.helloendless.com/blog. This week's episode will be posted and available by next Tuesday. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway and join the Twitter conversation sponsored by Alex Plaxton and Little Bird Told Media. Just tag your post with hashtag Event Icons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on Hashtag Event Icons.